are interviewing Mrs. Joan Ferencz. My name is Michelle Landabrucker. We're conducting this interview in Westchester County, New York, and in English. Today is August 22nd, 1995, and we are conducting an interview with Mrs. Joan Ferencz. My name is Michelle Landabrucker. We're conducting this interview in English and in Westchester County, New York. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Can we begin by having you tell me something about your family?
Yes. I was born in Siget, and I come from a family of 8 children.
When were you born?
I was born in 1920, September 1920, and I was the 8 children. I was the 5th of 8 children. There are 2 after me. And we were, I had a very happy childhood. My family was big, and every day was like a holiday. My father was a merchant. My mother was a housekeeper. She was a housewife. And my father came home from his business. 1 o'clock, he closed up till 3 o'clock, and it was like a holiday every day. It was in Europe, you had the main meal midday, and we had a table set with a white tablecloth every day, and everybody had to be around the table and had dinner together. School was till 1 o'clock, and when everybody was home, dinner was served. My mother had help because she had all those little children and she couldn't do it alone, and there were a lot of peasant girls, Romanian peasant girls, who were doing domestic work, so we had a living peasant girl all the time. Sometimes there were problems with them, but as far as I remember, until we grew up a little bit, we were a little older. This was before I came, before my father served in the war for 4 years, and life, I assume, I was told, was very, very tough for my mother because the army didn't pay anything, so she just struggled with 4 or 5 children terribly, and she did all kind of work. She was taking in geese and stuffed geese for rich people and whatever she could.
That was in the First World War.
That was after, but that was before me, I was told. But when I came along, my father was home and he was the merchant already. And we went to school, and I could say that it was a normal, tranquil, nice family life, big family life. The children, well, I have to give credit to my mother. With all those children, there was never fights or anything. If we had any complaints, we used to go to my parents, look, she's doing this or he's doing this. I do remember we had a neighbor who had no children. They were non-Jewish, and he came in once and he said to her, Mrs. Davider, how do you do this? A family full of children and never any noise in the house? Everybody is so respectful. And this I can remember until things began to change. In 1940, Hungary occupied Romania, and let me go back a little bit. Friends, we had mixed friends. Jewish friends, I had non-Jewish friends. And things were really very, very normal. We went, in the summertime, we went to the beaches. In the evenings, we went out to the promenade, and the town was a very cute little town. We had the military music was in the park, and everybody was walking around, and we had cafeterias. We sat in the cafeterias and had ice cream or whatever, and went after the young man, and the young man went after the young women.
Where did you go to the beach? Was it lake or ocean?
It was rivers. Oh, we had two rivers there, Isa and Tisa. There was, you know, Siget means an island. We were surrounded by water and mountains. And, you know, Siget was in a valley. Yeah, it was very, very pretty.
What were your parents' names?
My parents' names, my father was Jacob, and my mother was Rachel. Yeah.
And your maiden name?
Davidovich. And my father had opened a business. Well, it was tough. He didn't have the money, but there was a very, very affluent merchant in town who went into partnership with him and supplied him with the money. And I could say that now that I'm here, I have a great deal of respect for him. He supported a family of 10. And everybody looked decent, and everybody, we all went to school, and high school was private. You had to pay tuition. So could you imagine paying for 4 children at once tuition to go to school? It was not easy, but he did it. And so I give them a great deal of really respect for that. The holidays was a very important time in our family. My father was Orthodox, and he belonged. The temple was was a very important place for him. He went every morning and every night to the temple, and on the Sabbath we had. I can remember the summer times. We had a porch, a big porch. It was like a wraparound porch. And he was sitting outside Saturday afternoon with the Talmud all afternoon. Yeah. Friday nights was the most important evening if any of the children were not there for Kiddush. It was punishment. Wherever we were, we had to go out, and it was the most beautiful, really, evening with a big candelabra on the table and sitting around the table. And my father went to temple, and he always brought home like a young man who went to yeshiva, and we always had somebody at the table Friday night. We also had, during the week, there was always a young man having meals with us who was going to yeshiva, and he needed to have days, you know, each one. And Saturday night, till a certain time, we had to be home also for $50. Yeah. But then when we got a little bit older, my father realized that we're young people and we're going out to have a nice time, so he just let it go.
What language did you speak at home?
Most of the time Yiddish, yeah. Hungarian and Yiddish.
Did your parents speak Hungarian?
My parents spoke Hungarian, but most of the time they spoke Yiddish, yes.
What kind of food did your mom make for Sabbath?
Oh, for Sabbath, gefilte fish. There was no Sabbath without gefilte fish, and chicken soup, and chicken. And for Saturday, you had to cook the day before. So we went to the bakery, and she made cholent. And it was, Passover was a beautiful, beautiful holiday. I can remember we all went as children up at the attic and brought down the Passover dishes. Yes, and it was such a wonderful, wonderful time. And it was such a letdown when it was finished and we had to clean away those dishes and put them back. Yes. Until 1940, and yes.
We'll get there. I have another
Yeah,
question for
okay.
you. Did you share a bedroom?
Yes, yes. We shared a bedroom with, we had a bedroom with 2 beds and a sofa. So the girls slept in one bedroom.
How
Yeah.
many girls were there?
We were, well, 4 girls.
What were their names?
Frida, no, 3 girls, I'm sorry. The 4th one was married a long time, yes. 3 girls, we shared a bedroom. Frida, myself, and Lily.
And your sister that was married, what's her name?
Shari. She was married and she lived in another town, and she lived in Satmar.
How about the boys?
The boys had their own room.
What
Yes.
were their names?
And their name was Louis. Well, he was away for a long time. Eugene, in Yiddish, Yidel. And my baby brother, who's Eddie, his name was Moishe. Yes. They shared, and my parents had a bedroom. And we didn't have a living room, but we had a huge kitchen. And we had a little room, a sitting room. Yeah, a little sitting room.
Who was
Yes.
your best friend?
My best friend was, I have the school picture. She's still here. She lives in Israel. And she comes to visit. She has a son here, and I always see her. And if I go to Israel, I see her.
What's her
Yeah.
name?
Her name is Irene. Yeah, yeah. She unfortunately, she's a widow. She lost her husband a long time ago. Yeah.
Tell me about a typical day in your life before troubles began.
Okay. Shall I tell you a school day or a summer day?
Well, how about one of each?
All right. A school day. Of course, you got up early in the morning. You got dressed. My mother was out to make breakfast. And we left for school. We walked to school because, yeah.
Did you wear a uniform?
Yes, I wore a uniform. I wore black shoes and black stockings and a little navy blue dress with a white collar and a beret with a thing, you know. I had a red, yeah. I wore that. Not in public school, but, you know, when we finished, yeah. And we were in school till 1 o'clock, 6 days till 1 o'clock. In the afternoon, we came back from school, and there was always homework to be done. So we did homework. Then we did chores with my mother.
Was it a Jewish school?
No,
So you went to school on Saturday?
I went to school on Saturday. As a matter of fact, I went to a Catholic school with nuns.
And how
Well,
was
my
that?
public school was not Jewish either. It was a public school. And high school, gymnasium it was called there, was, they had which is called the Zardo, and they had the Lyceum. I went to the Zardo, and it was a Catholic school, and there were a lot of Jewish kids there. In the morning when we got to school, the non-Jewish kids went for services, and the Jewish kids remained in the class, and all day I was just studying.
So you always knew who was Jewish and who wasn't?
Yes, we knew it. Yeah, you always, let me tell you something. You always knew that who was Jewish and who wasn't, because underneath there was always a little bit of you knew that there was an undercurrent. Yeah, always. But it was not intense, and it was still freedom. Also, I wanted to tell you, Seagate was a city of maybe 30,000 population, and at least 10 or 12,000 of them were Jewish. And the business section, you know, the main street was really dominated by Jewish stores. And the chief rabbi, Teitelbaum was the chief rabbi. Friday afternoon, he sent out his young people there to make sure that everybody closed the store on time before Sabbath. And on Sabbath, it was a dead street because everything was closed. So it was dominated by Jewish, by the Jewish community. We also had a very big Jewish community office, which was, yes, they were very powerful too. And that happened again. This was going on live. And then, as we got older, we went to the movies, weekends, it was movies days, and school was very strict. You couldn't go during the week. They had truants watching you. So on weekends, we went to the movies, we walked around, we went to the park, we went bathing in the summertime, and as I grew up, I had my older sister. I'll show you the picture. She got married when I was very young. I was 12 years old, I think, and she lived in another town, and in the summertime we went to visit her, and we spent time in another city there. But we had to make sure to be home for holidays. My father wanted everybody to be around the table when a holiday came, so that's how important the holidays were. Yeah. Now, is there anything else that I left out that you want to ask me?
Well, you told me about a school day. You were telling me about a summer day. Anything else about a summer day you want to include?
Oh, a summer day is, yes. Summer day was very beautiful. We got up in the morning, and my mother, before everybody got up, went to the market already to bring fresh fruit and vegetables. So nobody ate till we waited for my mother to get home with the fresh fruit and vegetables. Then we had breakfast, fresh salads every morning, and then we went to the beach. We met friends, and we went to the beach. We went to libraries, we went to, there were concerts, we went to concerts, outdoor concerts, inside concerts. How old was I?
How far was the beach from your house?
Everything was walking distance. We had no buses. Everything a little longer, but walking distance, yes. It was very beautiful by the river, yeah. But my mother always put a fear in me. I never learned how to swim because she said it's very dangerous because we didn't have lifeguards. There are occasionally people, young people drowned because it wasn't, yeah. So she used to say, be careful because there are holes in the water and I don't want you to go too far. So, fear was built into me. But it was beautiful there, and they had these big rocks there, and we were sitting, and I had lots of pictures from there. And then we came home, and, well, of course, we usually went in the afternoon after dinner, and we came home, and we got dressed, and we went for a walk to the promenade, and met friends, and these were the summer days. Now, we didn't go on big vacations because my mother had it was a big family. It was, yeah.
Did your family have a radio?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes. We had a radio, and there was a shortwave radio during the war. Yes.
What did you listen to?
We listened to the Western very quietly, closed all the doors and everything, and we wanted to hear what's really going on the shortwave radios. Yes, we did have a radio. We didn't have a telephone, we didn't need it, but we had a radio, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we had they called it the phonograph, we had the music box, yes.
Talk to me about when politics started to change your life.
Politics started to change my life in 1940 when Hungary took over my town. And I remember we had a house with windows to the main street, and I looked out the window, and you wanted to, and I saw the Hungarian army marching in with people from my hometown who were very proud of, because a lot of Hungarians lived in my hometown from, you know, from before First World War. I was holding, I was holding three stools of thread, you know, with the color of the Hungarian color, and my tears were coming down. I was very, very scared, and I cried very much because we got along with the Romanians very well and with the young people very well, and we knew that Hungary is very much more anti-Semitic and things will be changed. In 1940, and then gradually, as soon as they came in, gradually things had gone from worse to worse, you know. The first thing was everybody had to have an ID with them.
Did that identify you as being Jewish?
Identification that you belong there, you're a citizen. Because no, anybody who didn't belong there, they shipped them to Poland. The business, then it started to, a law came out that Jewish young people cannot go to high school anymore.
Now, you had graduated at that point, yes? You were 20?
Yes, cannot go to high school anymore. Jewish merchants cannot close the businesses on Sabbath. So I remember I spent days in the business. It just became very tense. We didn't go out for walks anymore. We went to a movie occasionally, but we didn't go to concerts or places like that anymore. And my father had to travel to get his merchandise, and he was wearing a beard, you know, he was with a beard, and he didn't travel by himself. Many times he took me. My brothers were called into forced labor camp already. Yes.
When was that?
They started in 1941. Yeah. So all the young men disappeared. For 1991, 92, they all disappeared. There were no young men. So I used to go with my father. Then in 1993,
43?
1943, the businesses were confiscated.
How? How did that happen?
Well, this Hungarian man just came into my father's place, and he said, "I want your place. You have to hand over the keys to me." He came with a paper.
That was legal?
Huh?
That was legal?
Legal. Yes, that was legal. And he had to close the doors and give his keys to whoever wanted it.
When was that?
I think it was in 1943.
What was
Yes.
the name of your father's shop?
Davidovich, yeah.
Did he have any savings?
Yes, well, I don't know what happened to them.
How did your life change after your father's business was confiscated?
Well, he had a little savings, and we lived out of the savings. And he just tried to do a little business, you know, on the side, just to get by. And then part of your houses were taken. You know, the army was there. First we were occupied by the Italian army, which was wonderful. Those Italians were wonderful. They didn't know a difference, Jews or not, and they were serenading everywhere and singing. And that was a nice time for us. Then
How'd the Italians get there?
I really don't remember, but they were occupied, yeah, the Italians. Then they left, and in 1943, the end of 43, the German army occupied our city. Eichmann occupied all Hungary with the intention to, for the final solution. And before the ghetto, part of our house was occupied by Hungarian officers. And there was, I couldn't do anything, and he kind of tried to talk to us, sometimes. And I asked them, and we already wore the yellow stars. In around the middle of 1943, you had to put yellow stars on, not bands, stars.
Who told you you had to?
The laws came every day, something else came out. Legally, something else. Jews have to do this, and Jews have to do that. In Poland, which was not far from my town, it was, mass murders were raging. I don't know how my father got starting in 1942 already, I don't know how my father got the news, but he used to come home, for dinner and just sit and be devastated, not eat. He said, they killed again a whole town, and they killed again a whole town. And he had a brother who lived in Romania. He lived in Baku, and with 2 children. And I don't know what was the reason that the man wanted to come back home. That they wouldn't, they shipped him to Poland, and we never heard of him again, he and his family. He was devastated. He heard these news coming through, and he knew that sooner or later it will come to us too. So there was curfews. We couldn't get out. They allowed you. They allowed you to a certain time to go out and do some food shopping.
Like from what time to what time was your curfew?
During the day, sometimes I would say from 10 to 1 or something like that, and you couldn't go out. And I was going bananas, out of my mind. And I approached this officer who occupied if I could get a pass to go out and do some work anywhere. And the next day he came home and he said, if you wanted to go to the hospital, I'll give you a pass and you could go to the hospital. And I was really happy for that, except I was afraid to walk. I went to the hospital in the morning and I did, scrubbing work. They put me in the kitchen. I helped scrub the floor, wash the dishes, but I was grateful to get out. And one day I came home and I was stopped by these young men, what you would call rednecks, and they start to make fun of me, and he said, where are you going? And I said, I come from the hospital and I have a pass. And that's how they let me go.
Great. Let's
Yeah.
take a break now.
Yeah, okay.
Tape number 2 of our interview with Mrs. Joan Ferencz. Today is August 22nd, 1995. My name is Michelle Lander-Brooker, and we're conducting this interview in Westchester County, New York, and in English. Before we took our break, you were telling me about an incident in which you came back from the hospital and you were stopped
Yes.
Finish that story.
Yes, I was stopped, and I was very scared. I didn't know what they're going to do to me. There were about 3 of them standing up, you know, and looking at me. What are you doing in the street with a yellow star? Who are you? So I took my ID out, and I told them, I'm coming from the hospital. I'm working in the hospital, and here my voice was breaking already. I was scared, and luckily they let me go. I got home. Then after that, I was afraid to come home by myself already, and I asked one of the soldiers, which, you know, he was pretty nice. Would he, some of them were nice to you, they tried to help you, you know, not everybody was like villain. Some of them were a little bit human, yeah. And I asked him, would you walk me home? And he agreed. He walked me home. Not only did he walk me home, he gave me a bunch of cigarettes to take to my father. And when I got to the house, this was already in the ghetto. We were in the ghetto already, I think, yes. When I got to the ghetto, am I running ahead of myself?
You're fine.
The ghetto was just across the street from my house, from my original house. And there was a gate, and I was opening the gate to go in, and he says to me, you know, if you want to, you don't know where you're going to go. We knew already that they're going to take us somewhere. You don't know where you're going to go, he says, but I know it's not good. And if you want to, he says, I could hide you. And I was so shocked. I said, well, why would you want to do that? He said, because I just find that you're a nice person, and I would feel that, who knows, if you ever come back. I just didn't trust him. I said, no, I'm sorry, I have to go where my family goes.
Tell me about the ghetto. How did you get there?
Okay. When all these dispatches came out, every day something else, now they assigned certain parts of the city for ghettos. One part of the city was just across the street from where we lived. And they asked the people, also the Gentiles, to move out of there because they want to make a ghetto there. So they told you, I would say about 2 weeks ahead, that you have to get ready and you have to move into a ghetto.
How did you hear about the dispatches? Was it newspaper, radio?
It was posted, always posted, yeah, in the middle of the town. They were posted. So you start preparing, and we got, my mother made knapsacks for everybody, a knapsack. Well, what do you take in the ghetto? Just your personal belongings. You can't take anything else. You can't move. You don't move furniture. And we moved in with 3 other families, like in a 3-room place. And we were there for a month.
What'd you put in your knapsack?
My clothes, what do you think?
What month of the year was it?
It was in April, the beginning of April.
So you just had spring clothes with you?
Yeah. There was a market, a little market in the, a little place where people assembled. And my father went to the market one day. And he came back. They cropped him. They cropped his beard off. And they beat him up. So he was afraid to go out anymore. I'll never forget that. I remember them always having a beard. I couldn't remember him. And when he walked in, I couldn't recognize him. They cropped off his beard. That was in the ghetto they came in. We were in the ghetto for a month. What can I tell you? The young people were just with the friends. We were sitting around and just reminiscing. There was nothing to do. That was for a month.
How'd you get food?
How we got through it?
Food.
Food? Oh, they allowed the peasants to come into the ghetto to sell food.
Where'd you get money?
Well, whatever you had, a little accumulated money, that's all, yeah. For 6 weeks, we were in the ghetto. Then the other dispatches came out that we'll be taken away to working camps, and after the war, we'll come back. We didn't know where we go. I never heard of Auschwitz. This was the tragedy. Can I talk a little bit about this?
Please.
The tragedy of the Hungarian Jews. It happened in 1944 in May, from May through July. The D-Day was already around the corner. The war was almost over. Now, what I was reading, that Auschwitz was preparing for the Hungarian Jews. And they were organizing, the Jews were organizing. Somehow, somewhere, 2 young men escaped to the West to tell the West that the Hungarian Jews are going to be annihilated. Yes, they should do something about it. Turkey, the Turkish embassy, sent messages to the State Department that the Hungarian Jews are about to be taken. 400,000 Jews are about to be taken. Nobody did anything. Everybody knew, but we didn't know nothing. So, I'll get to that too when I arrived. Then they took us, one morning they assigned a date. You have to get ready and you'll be lined up in the marketplace and we'll take you to the trains. Everybody got ready and we went to the marketplace.
What did getting ready mean? What'd you take with you?
The knapsacks. Everybody took a knapsack with them, you know. And we stood in the marketplace, lined up for hours and hours, and we were sitting on our own knapsacks without food, without anything. Finally, late in the afternoon, you ever heard of the gendarmes? You know, with the feathers? They were watching us. They came and they marched us. We had a neighbor they had a little grocery store. The owner was the most pious man. Everybody knew that this is the most pious man that we ever knew. He never stayed in the store. He was always behind with the Talmud. And as we were marching, I saw this man being thrown on the floor and beaten. And that was the time I said, God, if you're there, why this man? Just something flew out of me. I said, I can't believe that you exist. And we got to the main temple. That's where we got for night because it was late. The trains were not ready or something. They took us to the main temple, you know, where my husband said he belonged to. It was a big temple. And they separated the women from the men. The women were with the children, were lying on the floor. And the men were in another room. And we heard all night, we heard screaming. They were beaten all night, the men. Not the women, the men were beaten all night. I could just see my father being beaten up there. Then early in the morning, I don't even remember with food what happened. Maybe they gave us something. I can't remember that. We marched to the trains, the famous trains, and pushed into the trains like herring, standing. There was no room to sit. For 3 days and 3 nights, locked into those trains, and no, not, you know, no sanitary conditions, no nothing, no water. And I only have one picture in front of my eyes. My father, he was not an old man. He was not 60 yet. And he looked like 100 years old, and he stuck his tongue out. He says, a little water, a little water. And I looked at him, and I thought to myself, look, I can't help him. What am I going to do? And the stench was unbearable, just unbearable. Finally, after 3 days, at night, they opened the doors, and we had fresh air, and for a moment I said, oh, it's not so bad. We have fresh air. At least we have fresh air, if nothing else. And then the screaming to get off the trains, you know, with German uniforms, with dogs. They walked around off the trains, and orders to be separated. First separated the men from the women at night, and also inmates were working there too, you know, with striped uniforms. They were working, they were afraid. They were very strict, but here and there, they were whispering, let your child go, let your mother go, you know, in the ears, in Yiddish, lasagain, you know, because on the loudspeakers, they said that the children and the elderly will go by bus because they can't walk. The young people will walk. I was holding on to my mother, and I let her go. And I lived at least for 30 years with this terrible, terrible guilt feeling that I let my mother go. I could have pulled her with me. I had talked to psychiatrists, it didn't let go on me that I let her go. But nevertheless, I let her go. And it was nighttime. And the ovens, the flames from the ovens were incredible. And I said, we asked the inmates, what's that? And they said, bread. They're bread bakeries, bread factories. But it smelled awful. This is nighttime. We were marched in finally. We don't know what happened to the children and to the elderly people. We don't know nothing. We never saw them again, that's for sure. We marched in, and they took us into a big room. It was like a warehouse. And they told us, throw everything you have, you got to throw down. Your clothes, your knapsacks, everything. And of course, you know, there were the inmates did all that, Polish. Unfortunately, they were there a long time, and they toughened up very, you know, they were very tough. And they were very angry at us while we came. They shaved your hair, of course, and they gave you a pair of old, I don't know what shoes they found there. They threw it on you, and they put a striped dress on you. And I was so naive, I got two right shoes or two left shoes, I don't even remember. And I ran back, and I said, look, you gave me the wrong shoes. And I got a smack on my head that I thought my head is gonna fall off, get away. Then I began to realize where I am. We walked out of this place. It was like you know, you threw everything down. Uh, I had two sisters there, my sister Lily and my sister Frida, and all my friends. We didn't recognize, we got hysterical. You know, I think it was a hysterical laugh. We didn't recognize each other. We come out with shaved heads. And it must have been already about 2 o'clock in the morning when they got us into the barracks. I was in Lager C and Barrack 9. And they pushed us in those, they called them koyas, you know, those square, one on top of the other. I would say at least 8 of us. You had to sleep there, and you had to sit there. And very, very tired and exhausted, and before you fell asleep, all of a sudden you hear, "Tselapel!" You have to get up and go out and be Tselapel. Tselapel was counting you for hours. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And this went on for, we were, and, you know, I had to talk a little bit about the climate there. If it was raining, you were on mud up to your knees. If the sun shone, if the sun was out, the sun was so strong, I luckily had, you know, tan skin. But if you were fair, I had friends walking around with raw skin burned from the sun, because you were just hanging around there. We had one couple. You know what a couple is?
Tell us.
Okay. Olga. She's a beautiful girl, young. She was so tough, and she said, "You animals, why did you come? Why did you come?" And we just looked at her. Did we have a choice? Of course you had a choice. She didn't say nothing the whole time, but she was very, very rough and tough with us. The day she found out that we'll be, well, I'll go to transport. Then we found out that we'll be transported into Germany, that we were there for quarantine and we'll be transferred into Germany. Well, the Zählerpell, you know, you stood for hours, and then they went to bring some black coffee, and they poured it out, and the food was handed into these little, whatever you call them, in one bowl with some thick mush, and everybody had to just take a sip. That was the food. No spoons, no nothing. And we didn't even care about that. The only complaint, and the only thing, what do we need legs for? We didn't know what to do with our legs. If we stretched them, it was in somebody else's mouth. If you held them like that, you got numb. You just didn't know what to do with your legs. You would have to go to the bathroom. You had to go when they wanted you to go. You couldn't go when you wanted to go. There was a time for everything. So you went to the bathroom, and it was this big public place with holes in it. And the couple was walking around. I don't even know if it was a couple or a German, walking around on top, you know, on top of you. And if you sat there for a minute longer, you got a thing, you know, with a whip. You got a whip over your head. So you were either constipated or you just, yeah, couldn't do anything. And this went on. Then they start to say, oh, in the showers, you know, on Schindler's List, when I saw this scene that you go into the shower and you don't know whether it's gas or is it this. I said, that's me. I was there. Yeah. You never knew whether it was gas or water. If it was water, we were just very lucky. Then the selection start, selecting, and it never ended. Nude, with the Germans there, the man examining you. If you had a pimple on your body, you went on the left. If you're lucky, you went on the right. Finally, the selection got finished, and my sister Frida was selected to the left. And don't ask me how, and don't ask me how I did it, but I saw her standing there, and I knew that she'll never come out of there. She'll go to the gas chambers, and I just couldn't live with that. And all of a sudden, I just jumped over, and I gave her a pull, and I pulled her to my line. I will never know how I did it. I just will never know, and I saved her. Yeah, because they didn't know. It wasn't counted yet. You know, it was still, I was standing here and she was there and she knew and she looked at me. And I just said, come closer, you know, like I winked to her and then I just stepped over. They must have turned around or something and I gave her a pull. And I'll never know how I did it and where I got the courage. I don't know.
Would you have been punished if you had been caught?
I would have gone with her. I would have gone with her. Finally, we were put on trains. The trains weren't a lot better, but it was room to lie on the floor, you know. We at least could, it wasn't crowded. It was just this group.
All women?
All women, yes. And I think they had benches there. We felt so civilized already. But we were not civilized actually because we arrived to this camp and these German commanders took over. And this camp had fountains in the middle of the yard, you know.
Do you remember the name of it?
Well, it was in Gelsenkirchen, but I don't know the name, yeah. And they had military barracks put up there. And we all ran to those fountains. We threw our clothes down. We forgot that there are men there. We just, you know, you become like an animal. You just don't care anymore because we felt, you know, closed down to wash ourselves. And somehow this one guy in uniform said, hey, you're women, what are you doing? Then we stopped and we couldn't believe it, that this man is maybe a little human. And over there, our job was to clean away. They have the oil refineries there, and the Allies were bombing there day and night. And our job was to clean away from the bombs, to put back the railroad tracks, and to build back. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the bombing. Every day. Every single day we were bombed, day and night. During the day, the British, and at night the Americans.
What were your living conditions?
We lived in military barracks, and they thought it was the army because it had the, you know, and it was a little bigger, you know, it was tiers and tiers up and down. And I was sleeping on a lower tier. And one night I hear zoom and a bomb right by my head, but it didn't explode. They pulled it out. The ground was very soft. I was telling that to my children recently. They couldn't get over it.
Were you still with your sister?
Yes. We were still the three of us together. Then sometimes in September, the British came and they decided to throw hand grenades on us. They didn't know who we are. We were 1,100 girls, 300 of us died right there on the field. Hand grenades were thrown on us. I survived with my 2 sisters. I don't know how. We were just lucky. All night long ambulances came from the town. The German ambulances came and they carried people into the hospital. Would you believe it? Yeah. I have friends now living in Israel. Some of them without an arm. One of them I know very well without a leg from there. They're in Israel. A little cousin of mine, I tried to help her. She was lying on the floor. She says, "Don't touch me." And I want her to pick it up, and her guts were coming out. And we were bombed out there, completely. Then they had to take us away from there. Everything was bombed.
How long do you think you were there?
We were there from June to September.
Sanitary conditions?
They had toilets there, yes. And they had, I don't know, outdoor showers, I think, something, yeah. We were able to. Food was served. Oh, we still had the sailor pals, you know. And something becomes of your own, too. The ones that were in charge were not that nice. I don't know what happened. Something becomes, you know. I guess it's either the fear or the power. I don't know. It's human nature. We had the sailor pals regularly every morning before we went to work. Yes.
Tell me about your relationship with your sisters.
My youngest sister was very, she still is, was the kind of child, she was very carefree. And my mother knew it. She never wanted to know about anything, just make herself beautiful and everything.
Lily.
Lily. And when she came to the camps, we somehow, for some reason, we always tried to protect her. I remember I gave her once, she had wooden shoes, and I had leather, you know, yeah, and I gave her my shoes because she said it's too heavy for her. And then I went to the office and I asked, we had 2 doctors in between us, and they had a infirmary. They formed an infirmary, inmates. And I asked them, and she was very pretty too, and they invited her to come to work in the infirmary instead of going out and putting the railroad tracks and this. So she worked in the infirmary. She always,
Why don't we take a break and then you can continue telling us?
Okay, yeah. Oh, it's finished?
This is tape number 3 of our interview with Mrs. Joan Ferencz. Today is August 22nd, 1995. My name is Michelle Landerbrucker. We're conducting this interview in Westchester County, New York, and we're speaking in English. Before we took a break, you were telling me about your sister Lily was working in the infirmary. Tell me about your relationship with your other sister. Remind me, what was her name?
Frida.
Frida. Tell me about Frida.
All 3 of us, we had a wonderful relationship. We helped each other. We tried to help each other. And there was no friction between us at all. I guess I have to go up there with our background, you know, we have no frictions, yeah. And we try to help each other. She was the oldest. She was, I would say, about 7, 8 years older than I am, yes. And of course, she was trying to sometimes be the mother, but really very helpful with each other, yes.
Did you have any news from your other family members?
For my other, no, during the constant, no. I don't know anything about anybody, no. And, but I always felt like I'm the strongest one. Yeah, I still feel the strongest one, yeah. I was trying to help my sister Lily, and my sister Frida was short, and you know, I just felt maybe she's older, and we tried to help each other, yes. And going on from there.
I have just one question before we move forward. Were any of the three of you ever sick in all of this period?
Yeah, I had I had hemorrhoid problems because of Auschwitz. I became constipated and I couldn't. But I went to the infirmary and I was scared because I was bleeding and I didn't know. And she said, "You have hemorrhoids," but not really sick. Luckily, no. I don't remember of any of us being really sick, which was lucky.
Did you lose weight?
Oh, when I came out of there, oh shoot, I was maybe 105 pounds. I was very, I'll get to that when I came out, how I met a friend of mine who was, she lived in Budapest and she was hiding. And she came to the train. She heard the train from Sziget is coming. She came to the train and she took us, some of us, to her house for lunch. And she had all that makeup on and she looked so beautiful. And I looked at her and I said, "You are so beautiful. I'll never look like you anymore, never." I had around here for years and years spots from the lice that ate me, because when we were, I'll get to that story. Well, not, shall I go on or shall I tell you this?
Sure, go on.
I have to go on that we were bombed out here, and we were taken to, the area of West Germany is called Thuringia. And it's a beautiful place, and we were in this town, Sommerda, which was a beautiful town, but they had a munition factory there, and I think they wanted it to be, you know, hidden for the bombing. And we were assigned there in barracks, and we were assigned there to work there 12 hours, in 12-hour shifts. Change over weekly, from 6 to 6 in the morning 1 week, and from 6 to 6 at night the other week. And you know, the transports met at 6 o'clock, before 6. One was going back to the camp, the other one started the work in the camp. My job was measuring the bullets. There were big bullets like this, and I was sitting at a scale with a belt, and I was measuring the bullets, and I was going just, you know, like that. And I guess from strains, you know, I was straining my wrist. I had a bump like that when I came home. I don't know the doctor told me it was something from straining, because, you know, you never stop. 12 hours, you stop maybe, I don't know, a half hour for a little lunch they gave you. We had a kitchen there, and our inmates worked in the kitchen. And over there something happened. When they took us out from, just came to my mind, when they took us out from Auschwitz, you know, pregnant women did not survive they either took him into Mengeles, where he was studying them, or they went to the gas chambers. This one young woman must have been maybe in her third month, and she didn't reveal her pregnancy. So she came with us. Then finally she had to reveal it. And she was constantly hidden by us, by the girls. And I don't know how we did it, but when it came to give birth, one night with the doctor, DME, the doctor, she gave birth, and they smothered the baby immediately, and she survived. That's how they wanted her to, try to survive. And that happened in summer already. She survived the bombs, she survived everything. And the baby was smothered. I don't know whether it was a girl or a boy, I don't remember. But it was very hush-hush. Only a few people knew about it. We worked there until March. In March, the Allies approached. We could hear already the guns, yeah. So what did they do? Instead of leaving us there, they just packed us up and put us to death marches.
March 1945.
March 1945, and we start marching.
Where?
I don't know, towards wherever, away from the Allies.
Did you see any civilians in your marching?
Okay, I'm coming to that. In the marching, we had German SS women with us. And I think they were crueler than the men. They used to walk with us and eat bags of cookies and pretzels right in front of us. Never even thinking a moment that these people dying from starvation. Nothing. One day we marched, and there was a woman with us who, no, that was a little later. Let me go chronologically. What did we eat? We ate in the fields. We picked sugarcane. And we made little fires and we cooked it. And that's what we ate, but it was so strong that it ate our throats up. No sanitary conditions. We had to use wherever you could go. And they dumped us in barns where other soldiers were, and they were infested with lice every night. They locked us in barns. One day, we were handed over to a commander with one eye. He was wearing a monocle, yeah. He was the biggest, I don't want to use the word,
Do you know
cruel.
his name? Do you know his name?
No. And we were marching one day, and apparently a young girl got a piece of bread from a civilian German, and he saw it. We got back to whatever it's called, the camp, to a place. It was farm places. He lined us up, and he says, this stays out forever in me, he says, the girl who accepted bread, come out here. He put her in front of us, and without a blink, he took his gun out and shot her in the temple. And she fell right there, and he left her there, go bury her. And Any of you who will accept anything from a civilian will get this. We had a lady who was, I think she was the oldest of us. She couldn't keep up with the walking because she had arthritis in her legs. And one day we had nothing anymore. She was left behind and we were sitting, resting, or they stopped us in a farm place. I don't know what it was. Well, we walked about 30 miles a day without food. Shoes were going already. It was terrible. One day, she was left behind and she caught up to us. And she sits down with us and she opens, you know, in a rag, piece of bread she had. She didn't get it from anybody. She just saved it. And I want to tell you, and she shared it with all of us. I'll never forget that. Everybody was so hungry that, you know, your stomach was just completely shrunk already. And she gave everybody a piece of bread and she says, I got some news for you. And no, she says, I got bad news for you. Oh, I remember. I got bad news for you. She says, Roosevelt died. I said, how do you know? She said she met a German and she said that bastard Rosenfeld died. To us, it was the end. We knew that this is the end. We thought that the only hope is Roosevelt. What do we know? We knew that the only hope is Roosevelt. And if he died, that's the end of us. The next day, we marched again. And we stopped, not in a barn, we stopped in a open field where there was, you know, when you build something, you make a big hole or something, you know, and they told us to get in there and make ourselves comfortable to go to sleep. It's rocks and everything, and we just, who cared, you know, but we all said goodbye to each other because they were walking above us with the bayonets. I said, where are they going to take us? They're going to shoot us all here. This is a perfect place to shoot us. So we all said goodbye to each other. And believe it or not, we slept under rocks. And we woke up and we were still there. I don't know, they didn't shoot us. And we walked and walked until, just walking, until we came one night, we didn't know it, we came one night, they locked us into a barn, a terrible barn. And in the morning, we heard tanks and shootings, and we looked through the cracks, and we saw tanks, and somebody said, the Russians. And here we're locked in. Start banging. About a half an hour later, Czech militia came with white vans, and they opened the doors and they said, you're free. May 9th, 1945. These women disappeared, the men disappeared. They locked us in because they wanted to disappear. They were afraid of us. But some of them were caught in the city during the day, and you know, this was a horrible way to be liberated. We didn't know what to do. There was no organization, it was not organized. And we walked around in the town, and you know, the Russians were looting, and it was looting going on, and then some of the people caught a German, an SS woman, and they didn't know what to do with her. They just beat her up or something, and they let her go. And finally, the militia came out with, you know, I don't know how we found out that there is a hotel, that all the, you know, the all of us, the people who got liberated this morning from the Germans should come to this hotel. But there was nobody to tell us what you could eat and what you can't. Somebody brought in a whole cow. And I found myself with the liver in my hand. I was sitting on the floor, and we were baking that. What I could tell you, I was lucky there was nothing wrong with me, but they were taking in people to the hospital. The stomachs couldn't take it. They were filling themselves up. I know my sister, Frida, was screaming from the top of her head. Her stomach was bothering her. She ended up in the hospital. And until it was organized, it was a terrible situation. Then finally, about a week later, they put us on trains, you know, whistle trains, heading towards whoever where you want to go.
How many of you were left?
We were left, well, they separated us. In my group, we were left about, I would say, about 300 of us. Well, we were originally 1,200. About 300 died in the raid, and then half of us were separated, which were better off. They went with the old commander, and he was, I would say, in a way, more liberal, a little bit human, more human than the rest of them, because when, first of all, they got to the Western Allies, you know, they were liberated, and when they really approached, he told them, listen, girls, I don't want to keep you anymore, just hide wherever you want, because you're going to be liberated, and he disappeared.
Were all of you from Sighet?
Most of us. No, we were from other towns too, from Satmar, from Berekszás, from Munkács. There were a lot of us, no. But a lot of them from Sighet. They put us on a whistle train, but the significance, I want to say, on Czech territory, you know, on every little town, the train stopped, and somehow they put dispatches out that people liberated from concentration camp are arriving. And the Czech people, I have such a soft spot for them, came out to the trains. They didn't have anything either, with breads and, you know, with whatever goose fat or chicken fat on it, you know, but big breads, whatever they had, they brought out for us to, in every town, until you got into Slovakia. There, they disappeared already, yeah. And we got to Budapest, and there, I told you, a friend came out, and she met us. And then we had to get a permit in Budapest to travel to Sighet. I wanted to go home. I was liberated by the Russians. If I would have been liberated by the Westerns, I don't think I would have gone home. There was no way for me to go anyplace. So I worked my way home. One of the deputies there who gave out the permits to travel was, he had a rank, my husband will know, he was, I think, the mayor of the city. And he was very nice. He used to call out, anybody from Sighet, come here, you're going to get your permit. So because mobs were there, and we got a permit, and I worked my way home. I don't remember, on buses, on trains. I know I arrived, three of us arrived at night, and some of our friends had family, brothers already, and they had apartments, and they took them off. We had nobody, so we went to the joint distribution, which my husband started. He was home before. He started the joint distribution. And we slept over there. And the next morning, I still had my prisoners, my striped dress on. I went to my house, and the furniture was packed away, and a Gentile was living there. But he went out, he got scared. He went out and he gave me, and I told him, I don't need the whole house, just give me 2 rooms. And I went to a Gentile neighbor, and I asked her, could you give me a dress, please? Lend me a dress. She gave me a dress, but then she asked me back for it. And I had my sister Shari's husband came back. He lived in another town, and he already had a business. And he asked us to come there, but I didn't want to go. My sister Lily went there. I stayed home and I waited for my brother Eddie, because he was liberated in Austria. He had typhus fever and he couldn't come home. And I waited for him. A friend of mine stayed with me, and it was very scary because the Russian army was very rough. You know, there were ratings, and you couldn't really commute any place. You tried to stay close to the house. My house where I lived, there was one Russian command that in the street somehow there were officers, a Russian officer group was placed in my street, and would you believe it, most of them were Jewish. And I told them that I'm so afraid. One of them was a physician, one was a musician, one was, you know, and they told us the stories about in Russia, how terrible. They all wanted to get away. And he told us that they'll try to protect, he had in the house next door to us, try to protect us, and we shouldn't go out, you know, but if anybody would try to get into the building, I should just call him. And it did happen one night. They were banging in the windows, and I got so scared, and he heard, and he looked out. And he, as an officer, told them, you better get away from there before I take my guns out. And I waited for my sister, for my brother, and he came home, a young boy. He had no hair on he lost all his hair, he had typhus fever, and he had a skin disease which was communicable. And he came home, and I got filled up with that skin disease. I'll never forget. It's an itching disease. I felt so sorry for him. He was the baby home, and he was in such a state of mind. It was just unbelievable. And okay, I did one thing that it warms my heart. In the town, they were already liberated young men, and one of them, whose parents were very affluent, and they had this big building where my father owned a business, and he was chief of police. That was all temporary, you know, because they all ended up in Israel. And I went up to him, and I said, you know that what happened to my father's store? I want those people out. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I want them out. And he had a brother who was out of town, and he told me, wait till he comes back. But this brother landed up to be a big shot in the Moshav, and he was one of the guys who captured Eichmann in South America. But this brother came home, and I stopped him in the street, and I said, Otzi was his name. I said, you know, those people? He said, come in with me. And he walked in with me, and he says, listen, you know this building belongs to me, and you know this store belonged to her father, 24 hours, out. So this was a little bit, you know, I felt good about that. And when my brother came home, my sister Regina was in this country, and she found out that we are here. And my brother Louis was in the army. Somehow, I don't know how, they sent us money, and we got $600 from here. My God, I was so rich. And then I told my brother, I don't know what you're going to do, but if you want to open a store, the store is there, you know, where my father had. So he and a friend of his went and opened a little haberdashery store, yeah, for a short time though. And then he decided he doesn't want to stay here. He wants to go to Germany and work his way here. And one night, we found a coat, my brother Eugene's coat, a winter coat. Winters were very harsh there. And it was in the winter, in January. And he was taking a bus, I don't know where. You know, a bus was working towards Germany. And 4 o'clock in the morning, I took him to the bus. And when he left, I cried so that the tears froze on my face because I didn't know where he's going. Here is this young kid. He goes to the world. Where is he going? And I just felt that my heart goes out. And I walked back. It was 6 o'clock in the morning already. And I met a couple of friends who were engaged. They live here. He died already. And they called me into this cafeteria and bought me a cup of coffee. And I cried my heart out. Yeah. And we were talking there. These are certain things that stand out in your mind. Okay.
So from your family, 8 children, 2 parents, who survived?
Everyone except my parents and my oldest sister, Shari. She had 2 children. I guess we were all at an age, we were strong, good genes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Changed heads.
Yeah.
Tape number 4 of our interview with Mrs. Joan Ferencz. Today's August 22nd, 1995. My name is Michelle Landabrucker. We are interviewing in Westchester County, New York, and the language of the interview is English. Okay, so Eddie went off to Germany. You're now by yourself. Tell me what happened next.
Okay, now I am by myself, and my sister Lily got herself engaged, and I stayed till she got married. I had a brother-in-law. Well, I'll go in a little bit. I never talked about this a little bit. My brother-in-law, my sister Sherry's husband, came back. I was much younger than him, and they lived in a smaller town than Siget, but they were very good after the war. They became very affluent because they were in the lumber business. The whole family was in the lumber business, and they were doing pretty good. And when, I don't know, they had a big party, and they invited me to come up for the party. It was in the country, really, in the mountains. And somebody got a bright idea that we should get engaged. That was a terrible situation. And this, you know, I couldn't see myself, and I remember I wrote to at this point already, my sister Frida was in Czechoslovakia. She met her husband. He came back from forced labor camp, and she met her husband, and they lived in Auszig, yeah, in the Sudetenland, yeah. And I wrote to her, And she told me, under no circumstances you should do things that you don't want to do. You come here, and then we'll see what's going to happen from here, you know.
So you were 25 at the time.
Yes.
And how old was Sherry's husband?
Well, my sister Sherry was at least 10 years older than me, and he was maybe 16, 17, 18 years older. Who knows? Yeah. He looked good, but, you know, he wanted to remain in the family. And then she said, under no circumstances, and she wrote here, and my sister here said, under no circumstances you should do things like that, you know, only if you want to. But if you feel that this is not for you, under no circumstances, then work yourself away, try to get here. I had a little money which my sister sent. But traveling was very difficult. By now I had an ID card, you know, an ID card from my birthplace. Traveling was very difficult. You were afraid to travel by yourself. First of all, the borders were not open. You had to smuggle yourself through the borders, because first there was a Czech border, then it was a Czechoslovakia, then was a Czechoslovakia, a Hungarian border, then a Czechoslovakian border. It was very difficult because by now this was Romania already again. Romania occupied it, then it was Czech, then it was Hungary, then was, you know, it was very hard to get through the borders. And also, the trains were full of Russian soldiers, and wherever there were young girls, they didn't ask you who you are. You were in trouble, you know, there were a lot of rapings going on. And raids, you know, they took them to Siberia. It was a crazy, crazy world. Now, what am I going to do now? There was a young man in town who was engaged to a girl around where I was going to Prague, in Prague. And he was by this time, a year later, he was already very sure of himself. He had money. He was, you know, it was... And I approached him, and I said, you're going to Prague, and I'm going to Osijek, which is not far. Can I travel with you? He said, sure. Come, I'll, you know, you could be with me. And I can't remember how we went through the first border. It was at night, and we were running, you know, these shacks with the borders, we were running under the windows, and they caught us, and we went in, and I don't know, somehow we got through. And they hired, what I have known, there was no transportation. They hired a horse and wagon to the next town where there is a bus. And I kept going with him. And finally, we got to Budapest. In Budapest, it was, inflation was so outrageous that you had to carry millions of forint, you know, forint was the money, to buy something, and I just didn't know what to do. And I said, you know what, here is some of my money, and please, just, yeah. He was very, very good to me. And finally, we got ourselves on a train, and there was a raid on the train. And he said, you have an ID? I said, yes. He said, get rid of it. I don't know, for some reason, he said, get rid of the ID. And me, instead of hiding it, I just tore it off. I was so afraid that I tore it off. We got into Czechoslovakia. This, you have to listen to this. Tito came to Czechoslovakia. I got in there, and I went to register. My brother-in-law said, every foreigner has to register. They wouldn't let me go out. He said, Tito is here and every foreigner is held. And they put me in an intern camp. I was there with Czechs, and I cried my heart out. I just got out of concentration camp. What is this? I was there for about a week and a half. Then finally, Tito left, and they let me go. I stayed in Czechoslovakia. Then I heard my brother as a young man was a Zionist, and he worked his way to Israel. You know, when things got bad, he worked his way. That was those days when you were on a ship for months, and he got to Israel.
Which brother?
Louis.
Louis.
And he was in Israel. He was such a big Zionist because my father didn't want to let the children go away, none of the children. Then things were very bad in Israel, and my sister from here made him papers, and he came here. And as soon as he arrived here, the war broke out, and he went into the army. He was a GI. He served in the whole war in the army. And when he was, after the war, he was discharged, he decided to come back and look for his family. I had my sister Lily living in Romania. She had already a little child, and she came to Czechoslovakia. He came to Czechoslovakia, and I was there. And he said, you know, I'm not going to leave you here because I don't want you to go back, and I don't want you to get married to anybody that you don't want to. But we need a passport. And there was a Romanian legation in Prague, and this big fat guy was sitting there, and I went in and I said, you know, I'm Romanian, I'm a displaced person, I just came back, I have no papers, I need an ID, could you get me one? He refused to get me one. So I went back home, and my brother-in-law, my sister Frida's husband, says, well, the hell with him, I could get your passport. And he went away to Prague, and he met some people, and he made me a passport. But he said, I need another name for you, and he came back with a passport.
What name?
This name, Joan. Yeah, he says, take your cousin's name. And he came back with a passport. And my brother was able to get me as a visitor with him. I remember we waited for a boat in Paris for 6 weeks. That's when I met my husband there. And we got here, and then not long after that, the Displaced Person Act came out, and I did my papers, and then he came out, and he had a lot of trouble till he got his papers. He will tell you the story, and we couldn't get married till 1950. Yeah.
Because of the papers?
Oh, the papers. I didn't have papers to protect him, and he came with a transit visa, and he'll tell you the story, and we couldn't get married till 1950. 1950, because I came out in January 1947, and he came out, and that's how I remained with this name. And he came out in August 1947. So for 2.5 years, we couldn't get married because we were waiting for papers. Yeah. And then my name changed to Ferencz, and I was living like that.
What's your maiden name on your marriage certificate?
Bash. So then, you want me to go on?
Please.
We got married. We had nothing. We lived in a furnished room. I worked. And first I worked, my brother-in-law had a factory, belt factory. I arrived, he gave me a job there. But I, couldn't work there. And I decided to go to school. And, well, I went to school anyway. I wanted to learn English. I picked up English very quickly, really very quick. And because I must tell you, when I arrived here, after so many mishaps and so much trouble, I wanted to lay down and kiss the ground. I said, never again will I go away from here. This is going to be my home. And I, like with Gone with the Wind, and I swear to God that I'm going to make a life for myself. This is what I said to myself. And thank God I succeeded. First I worked in a factory, in his factory, and then I didn't want to work there. And then I went to school and I took up some bookkeeping. And I worked, then I got to the department store and I worked, I was doing inventory in the shoe department. I was doing inventory, and then I worked in the office, and then they went computer. But in between, this is my work thing, but my life in between, I got married in 1950, and my husband always wanted to be in business, so he went into business. My brother-in-law went broke. He went into business with my brother-in-law, and they went broke, both of them. And I worked very, very hard. I worked overtime and everything, and then I got sick, and the doctor told me I worked too hard. I worked Saturdays, I worked Sundays, that I have to take it easy a little bit. And by then, we had an apartment, a small apartment already. We had 1 bedroom in Kew Garden Hills, yes. First, we lived in the Bronx in a furnished room. And we had an apartment, yes. Then
Children?
the children came after. Then when things got a little bit better, he was working. We tried to get children because we were not so young anymore. First it didn't come, but then then the children came. I was pregnant with my son when we were able to get an apartment in Jamaica Estates, which was already very beautiful, through somebody, through a relative. And we had a 1-bedroom apartment there, but it was beautiful. And we moved in there a week before my son was born, yes. And he was born in 1953. Then my daughter was born in 1956. And we were able to get in the same building a bigger apartment, but this was already luxury because it was very beautiful. It was a doorman, and it was, yeah. And then I didn't work because he had a job. He had a nice job. He came here and he got a job, and his boss liked him so much that the second week that he worked, he gave him a raise, yeah. And we lived very modestly, but we managed. And then when the children got a little bit bigger, he was doing well, and they went to camp, and I went back to work. Yes, that's when I went back to work to A&S. I went back to work, and we both worked, and things had gotten better and better. And then we got already we had a 5-room apartment with 2 bathrooms when the children got bigger, yes. Somehow he never wanted to buy a house. He worked hard. He worked very hard. He worked 6 days all the time. And he didn't want to travel this was convenient. And children went to school. The neighborhood I lived was a very good neighborhood, and the schools were very good. 131 was like a private school. And we had then, they went to high school, and my son went to college, and he opened his business then. He went to college. He went to a very good college. He went to Franklin and Marshall, yes. And he wanted to be a physician, so we worked very hard to make him be a physician. And my daughter when she grew up, she was a little wild, like all the kids in the 60s. But she was a good kid, yeah. And she went to college. First she went to New Paltz, then she graduated from Columbia as a dental hygienist. Then she got married, and she decided she wants to be a nutritionist, and she got a master's in NYU from nutrition. And she got married, and then he opened his business, and I went into work in 1977, I think. I went into work with him, and the children were already on their own. And we worked together till 1982. That's when he retired, and he sold his business. And here I am, if you have anything else to tell me.
Your story is very wonderful, and thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
I do have a couple more questions for you. List for me the languages you speak.
Okay, well, English accent, but I speak it.
Speak great.
Yeah. Hungarian, Yiddish. I speak some Romanian a little bit yet. And that's all. I used to speak a little French, but I forgot it. Yes. And German, yes.
Was that skill in language helpful to you?
Yes. German was helpful for me. The skill in language was helpful because I stayed in Czechoslovakia for 6 months. And I should have pursued, because I think I have a feel for languages. And I was almost speaking Czech already, yes. And in Paris, I was 6 weeks, and it was very helpful for me, very much so. And even in Germany, you know, when we were in concentration, we could communicate with those, I don't want to use the B word, yeah. And,
Can I finish?
Yes, so the language helped me, yes. And when I came out here, when I was in Czechoslovakia, I started to learn a little bit English on my own. Then I came here, and we had a neighbor who was an English teacher, and I took private lessons. I stayed with my sister then, before I was married. Private lessons, and I was so determined that going to work, I took the English paper. I never took a foreign paper in my hand. Would you believe it? Since I came here, I took the English paper in the subway, and I tried to compare German and Latin. I found Latin words, I found German words, and I compared them, and I made them up. And that's how it helped me a great deal, because I spoke a Latin language, which is Romanian, and German, and I found the English language is made out of German and Latin. And I was determined, and that's how, in 6 months, I spoke the language. Yeah.
Why do you think you survived?
Determination. Determined. Yeah. To survive. I guess I had in me the zest of living. I want to live. Yeah.
Is there any message you'd like to leave us with 50 years after the fact?
Well, I like to leave a message for the young people to go and listen to these tapes and to remember what had happened, and not to say that it can never happen, because it could happen any place and anywhere. And just have in mind, if anything like that is brewing anything, just organize and be prepared, and don't ever let it happen again.
Thank you.
This is a photograph of my family, which has been taken probably around 1927 or maybe 28. I'm starting with my sister Shari. Next to her is me, Joan. Sitting next to me is my sister Lily. Sitting next to her is my mother, Rachel Zola. Standing up there is my sister Frida. Sitting in my father's lap is my brother Eddie. My father, Jacob Davidovich. My brother Eugene standing, and sitting down is my brother Louis.
Where was this photograph taken?
And Siget. This is one of my school pictures. It was probably taken in 1936 or in 1937. I am standing the second from left. I went to a school which was actually a Catholic school. You could see a nun sitting there. She was the head of my class, and she was my math teacher. But that time, this was the private school, and this was the school to go. And most of those children, those girls standing there, they're all Jewish girls. And the picture was taken in Siget.
You were standing in the top row.
On the top row, the second from left. And the picture was given to me, actually was sent to me from Israel by a friend of mine, the girl who was sitting next to the nun to the right. She lives in Israel, and she mailed it to me. This picture was taken in Siget. Somewhere, if you see in back of it, is a well. And there is myself, Joan, and my sister Lily, and my brother Eddie. I think I was maybe 15 years old there, and my sister Lily was 13, and Eddie was 10 years old.
You are on which side of the photograph?
I'm on the right side of the photograph with the dark coat. This picture was taken in New York, sometimes in 1949. And I am the third from the left. The first one is a girl, cousin. She came from Colorado to visit. The second one is a cousin who had just come from abroad. She just arrived, and she got married. She's here. And the last one is a niece of mine, my sister Regina's daughter.